What if Doctor Strange lost his heart? That'd be pretty terrifying. Overall, I really enjoyed this episode, and I thought it was really interesting, but there were a couple of splinters that stuck in my mind while I was watching it. What did you think of this episode? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Durbania. I'm Durbin, and this is my spoiler talk review for What If Episode 4, What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart. Like I said, overall, I thought this was a pretty darn good episode. Doctor Strange is one of my favorite MCU movies, and I did this video, Doctor Strange and the 3 Keys to Power. Definitely check that video out. It dives more into some of the stuff I'm going to touch on in this video, but there's a lot of very interesting things I found in that movie, and I think it's a good video worth your time to check out. So one of the things that I really like about this particular episode is that it drives home this message. Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life. Because you really see in this episode how Doctor Strange does not guard his heart and how that determines the course of his life. We also see he's not on an island. His choices affect more than just him, and so we really see the consequences of him not guarding his heart. One of the powerful things about the Doctor Strange movie is seeing, again, he had an unguarded heart. He had given his heart, his identity, over to what he was doing, being the most successful surgeon, turning down some cases because they wouldn't give him enough glory, accepting others that are just challenging enough that will cause him to rise above everybody else. His identity was in that. Then when his hands were broken and, never to be used again in surgery, it's like that part of his identity was destroyed. He was shaken to the core because he had given his heart over to something that could be shaken, rather than putting it in something that is unshakable. But then he learns this very simple lesson.
It's not about you.
He had made it all about him, and he had to let go of his fear, his arrogance, and he had to learn that simple truth. And when he had accepted that simple truth in his heart, it determined a new course for his life. He basically became a new creature.
You cannot beat a river into submission. You have to surrender to its current and use its power as your own.
So in this episode, he's got that lesson in his heart. Does he guard it? Not really. And we see the consequences of him letting that go and how not guarding his heart determined the course of his life in that negative direction. Now, like I said, there were 2 splinters that stuck in my mind as I was watching this episode. And it's not like these splinters are super big deals. You kind of explain them away. But nonetheless, I couldn't stop thinking about these things as I was watching the episode. So Christine dies. That was incredibly depressing. And the fact that that car came up behind them, boom! Oh my gosh, I was really sad when Christine died. But then they said that basically the events of the movie still occurred. They still happened. Now it makes me wonder, because there's that moment where Doctor Strange almost died and he had to get to the hospital, and Christine basically saved his life.
Just a little while.
Now, I'm sure he called on that one doctor that irritates him, or any other doctor, and they would have done the same thing to save his life, but it seems that he needed Christine. He needed Christine in there alone so that she could patch him up and he could go do his own thing. So it makes me wonder, how would that have gone down? If they're saying the rest of this movie went the way it was supposed to, minus Christine, how did that look minus Christine? Like I said, it's explainable. It's not a big deal, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, wondering how did that unfold in this world? The other thing that was kind of sticking in my mind is this. This episode was all about the fact that this absolute point in time that could not be changed, because it's what set Doctor Strange's destiny in motion. It was the death of Christine. So no matter how many times he went back in time and he changed the circumstances, she still died that very night in the most tragic ways possible. But she kept dying because it was the very thing that drove him into the mystic arts to become the Sorcerer Supreme. So it was something that could not be changed. The one splinter in my mind is, yeah, but I've seen the alternate universe where Christine lives. I've seen that. So I know it's possible for Christine to live and then he still be driven to become the Sorcerer Supreme. I have seen that happen. I understand. It's 2 different universes. The universe we know, it's all about his hands. So if he went back in time to stop his hands from breaking, I'm sure they would have broke under a different circumstance that very night. Like, I'm sure something would have happened because it is that absolute point in time, because it brought him to become the Sorcerer Supreme. So I guess 2 different universes have 2 different rules. I'm not saying I don't get it. I'm just saying I've seen the alternate version. I've seen a version where he becomes the Sorcerer Supreme without Christine dying. So those were the two splinters that were in my head, but they weren't big deals, right? So once you take those two things and you set them aside, I still found this episode very compelling, very interesting, and it really drew me in with the message of it more than anything else. Because what you really see is Doctor Strange tempted. I mean, he's sitting there by the window, he's holding the eye in his hand, and he's just tempted. He's tempted to use it to travel back in time. And they did a good job showing where the seed got planted, like when he's moving the apple forward and backwards in times, and it's like being eaten and then going back to not being eaten. And so you see him go, time travel. And so you see that temptation, you see that seed being planted. And what that seed wants to do is it wants to grow up and become these thorns and thistles that choke the truth and destroy the truth that he already has in his heart. And so you really do see him yield to that. I mean, you even have Wong, who gives him a chance to get out of it. Wong says, I'm gonna go ahead and put the kettle on. Come and have a drink with me before you do something stupid. Like, he's just that simple and blunt. But Doctor Strange doesn't take the way out. And in not taking the way out, he waters that seed of temptation as he continues to yield. And the more he yields to it, you notice, the stronger it becomes. So even when the Ancient One comes to him and gives him a way out, saying, you've got to stop doing this because you're going to destroy the universe by trying to change this absolute point in time. No, he's like, I've learned nothing's impossible. I'm just going to go do this. And so he goes to that library. And it was interesting because what he finds in that library is it is possible to change an absolute point in time. You just got to get the power to do it. He's becoming more and more selfish as he's letting that sin nature control his mind. As he's not guarding his heart, and he's given himself over to that. You see, in the movie, what did he give his heart over to? It looked like he had given his heart over to his career, his hubris, all of that stuff. And then when his hands were hurt, that was taken from him. And this one, he believes Christine is going to make him whole. And so he's put all of his faith in this person to make him complete, which is really too much weight to put on any one person. But as he's putting that weight on her, he's getting more and more selfish about it. He doesn't want to bring her back just so that she herself can live, whether she's with him or not. You really see he begins to transform into, he wants her to come back for him so that he could be whole and complete. It seriously becomes this whole selfish thing because now that is what he has given his heart and his identity over to. And so here you have the tentacle monster from the first episode. Love that connection. Now I'm really excited to see where we're going to go with that monster because you know they're building something. And he asks it politely for its power and it knocks him out. So then you see he gets mad, and this is where you see another major line crossed, where he calls up creatures and living things from other dimensions and absorbs them into himself. So you see it getting darker, and all it is little by little by little. And that's all it is giving into one little temptation here, one little temptation there, and that's how sin sits at the door, and it waits for us to open and then just takes over, and that is exactly what is going on with Doctor Strange. In fact, it's very interesting imagery in the fact that as he's taking more and more of the essence of these animals, he's becoming less and less human. We see him more and more animal, like he's losing his humanity the more he's giving into this. One of the interesting things in the scene is when you have the Watcher and he's narrating to us, and then Doctor Strange turns around and goes, who's there? Like the fact that he could sense the Watcher, I thought that was really interesting. It makes perfect sense. But then the thing that was really interesting is to find out what the Ancient One did. That the Ancient One split him in two. Now, on the one hand, could it get more confusing? We're already in an alternate universe in the MCU. Now, within this branch of this other universe, on this timeline, you now have two separate timelines together. She split him. And it's interesting because what you have is the Ancient One doing everything she can to save him, everything she can to pull him off of this path. She comes to him and he won't listen. So she splits him in two and she goes to that good version of him. But what's interesting is now you got the good Doctor Strange on one timeline and you got the bad Doctor Strange. What I like about that is it presents this picture. So letting your sinful nature control your mind leads to death, but letting the Spirit control your mind leads to life and peace. So by splitting him in two, we now have a picture of that verse, because bad Doctor Strange definitely gives us that picture of he's let sin in, he's given into that temptation, and now that sin nature is controlling his mind and it's leading him to death. I mean, you can even see it in his eyes before he even gets to the consequences at the end, how much it's taking from him. And then you have the other one who is letting the Spirit control his mind and it's leading to life and peace. The other thing interesting is when they confront each other, the two Doctor Stranges, It's interesting what they say to each other. So the good Doctor Strange, he says this: if we save Christine, we destroy the world. But the bad Doctor Strange's response is interesting. She doesn't understand. We love Christine. Now, what I find interesting about that is it doesn't even really answer properly what the first one said. The first one is directing him to the truth. He's saying, if we save her, we destroy the entire world. But it shows you how that sin nature works in controlling the mind. I think bad Doctor Strange knew it. I think he did, but I think he had the blinders on. He wanted what he wanted, and he defeats the good Doctor Strange. I found that tragic that he defeats the good Doctor Strange. But what I liked about it is it really drove this point home. Because how sad was it when he got what he wanted? He brought Christine back. He changed that absolute point in time. And what did it do? It destroyed the universe. And so there he is with his powers trying to hold back the destruction, the nothing that is coming. He's trying to hold it back. And now he's begging the Watcher. That was interesting. Again, the Watcher breaking the fourth wall. No, he already breaks the fourth wall. Breaking the fifth wall. Whatever number it is, he's breaking another wall, and he and Doctor Strange are talking. And Doctor Strange is pleading with him.
I was wrong.
You were warned.
I know, but the world shouldn't pay for my arrogance.
And so that was really tragic, because as soon as the nothing takes over, you have Doctor Strange and Christine alone in that purple bubble floating in nothing. And then she vanishes. So yeah, he got her back, and yet he didn't. He went pursuing this one thing, putting all of his heart into it, and it was nothing. And it left him alone, floating in nothing. It really hammers home. The mind controlled by the sin nature leads to only one place, death. And we saw how it led to that place. So to me, it really brings home that point. Guard your heart, for it determines the course of your life. The best way for us to guard our heart is to give that over to God. Matthew 6:33, seek God first. And seeking God first doesn't mean making God a means to an end, because that's still us taking our heart, having it unguarded, and giving it over to the thing. That we're putting our identity and our heart in the thing. That's not where God wants it. When he says seek God first, that means you come to God for the sake of God, for the sake of having a relationship with him, because he's good and he loves us. Jesus said he didn't come to steal, kill, and destroy. He said that's what the thief does. Jesus said, I came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. And John 3:16, that's where Jesus said, God so loved the world, he so loved you and me that he gave his only son. So God is love. So we should want God for the sake of God. And when we give our hearts over to God and place our identity in him, that's truly guarding it. We're giving it to him and trusting him. And when we have that relationship with him and we let him lead us, what does it say? But letting the Spirit control your mind leads to life and peace. So I thought this was a really interesting episode. I thought it brought this point home really well. What did you think of this episode? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Were you somewhere in the middle? I want to hear from you in the comments right now. While you're there, hit the subscribe button to become a Durbanian. Hit the bell by the subscribe button so you're notified for my next Marvel review, movie review, theological analysis, or anything else I do here. Check out that Doctor Strange and the 3 Keys to Power video. I think it's a nice addition to what we talked about here. I'm Durbin. Thanks for checking out Durbania.